Hello and welcome to How to Automotive. In today's video, I was going to start out by showing you how to replace an axle seal on this Ford F250 here. It's leaking, but when I was tearing into it, I noticed that the front wheel bearing has gone bad. So that's probably the root cause of the axle seal leaking. So now we're going to tackle the wheel bearing and the axle seal, and I'm going to walk you step by step through my process of doing this job. So I wanted to give a big thank you to our sponsor of the day, Gunk. They supplied us with all the brake clean and degreasers we need to clean up all these parts in this video. So thank you for them, and also the links will be down in the description of the video. That way if you guys need to pick any of these products up, you can find those links there. The first thing we need to do is get the vehicle jacked up and get the wheel off. I'm going to give you all my tips and tricks on this to make it go as smooth as possible. All right, the first thing we need to do is get floor jacks and jack stands to get the vehicle off the ground and get this tire off. If you got impact tools, you can go ahead and bust those lug nuts off. If you don't, crack those lug nuts free before you jack it up. So I jacked it up from the center of the carrier, put the jack stands under the axles, and then removed the tires. So I'm working on the driver's side on mine. It's the same process for the passenger side. First thing I did was I turned the steering wheel so I can get access to the back of the caliper bolt. So we're going to take the caliper off, and then we'll take the rotor off. I'm going to take I'm not going to take the caliper off and then the bracket. I'm going to leave that attached and just take the bracket and caliper off as one assembly, and then we're going to set it up over here on top of the leaf spring and get it out of our way. That off, you can either use a 1/2-inch drive, ratchet or breaker bar, or if you have access to impact tools like I do here, I'm going to take the bolts off here and here. So we're not taking the caliper bolts, we're taking the bracket bolts off. We're leaving the pads, calipers, everything attached to it. Once you get it unbolted, now you can take the caliper off like this, and we're just going to set it up here on top of the frame. So now there's no tension on the brake hose, and it's supported up there. Now you can see my axle seal was just starting to leak, so we got to it before it was serious. So my F250 has a floating rotor, so I'm going to go ahead and take that off, and then we'll work on getting the hub assembly off. So on mine, I found the root cause of why the seal is leaking. It's because the bearing is bad. You got a couple options. Before you tear it all apart, you can take some degreaser like this, spray it down in maybe pressure washer, or use a water hose and clean the area up. Or as you go, you can clean the parts with brake clean. So because of the way I'm working, I'm going to use the brake clean. That way I'm not kneeling down into water or anything like that, so it's a dry surface. So now we're going to start working on getting the hub assembly off so we can get our axle shaft removed. On some hubs, there'll be bolts go around the perimeter here. You'll remove those to pull the cap off. But on my hub, it has a spring clamp. You'll use a pair of pliers and squeeze the clamp like this and squeeze it, and then you'll wiggle the cap in a hub assembly like this, pull the clamp off, and then just wiggle the cap and off it comes. Now I'm going to take the snap ring out right here. All right, so I get in there with a pair of snap ring pliers and get this hot rod out. All right, once you get the snap ring out, then there's a couple washers. I just use a pick tool like you see here to get back behind here, pull them off. And I'm going to leave them exactly the way I took them off. So you got a flat washer, a nuts hexagon washer, and then another flat washer. I'm going to set these aside. Now there's bolts on the back of the hub here that I'm going to take off, so that you can see the bolts here, and one here, and they come from the back side. I'm going to unbolt that, and this hub will come off. On some four-wheel drive hubs, there's a nut that you have to unthread, and there might be like a keeper in there, so you have to take the keeper out and take the nut off. And there also could be a snap ring and some O-rings. Different styles of hubs are out there, so depending on what type of hub you have, you'll have to deal with that. And so mine's just pretty simple. So now I'm just going to get back here, and I'll be getting those nuts right there and there, and then I'll turn the wheel the opposite directions, and then I'll get the nuts on this side here, and then the hub itself will come off. To get to these nuts back here, I'm going to use a 21mm socket and a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, or you can use an impact gun if you have one. So you can get on there and you can crack these free. Take off these two, and like I said, spin the wheel this way. One thing on Fords is if you turn the wheel with the engine off, sometimes it back feeds the power steering reservoir, and fluid can push out of the cap and leak down. So be aware of that. You may want to have a bucket close by to catch any fluid that may backfeed back through the reservoir and come out, and you may have to top off your power steering fluid after you're done. You got the wheel turn. Now I'm gonna get on this side. Now that I got the hub unbolted, I'm gonna use a hammer. You want to be careful not to hit the backing plate when you do this. There you go. So I found the best way to get these hubs off is to keep the axle as straight as possible, hold it with one hand, and tap from the back side here. Sometimes you can use pry bars and pry it out. And sometimes if you're unlucky and the seal cocks inside the hub, you may have to bend the inside seal here and just kind of deform it a little bit to get it out. You're replacing it with a new one anyways. So as you can see on the driver's side, I had to bend the dust seal to get the axle shaft out. Once I got it removed, and the axle shaft just pulled right out. Okay, once you get this hub assembly, axle shaft, everything out, now you're going to do the exact same thing. The opposite side, you're going to take this side apart as well. And the reason why is we got to take out the carrier portion of it. We got to take that out to get to the inner seals. On the passenger side, I used the double pry bar technique here to get the axle out. I pried behind the dust boot here and the U-joints, and that allowed me to pop the axle right out. It came out a lot easier. I did not have to bend or deform the outer dust boot seal, and it came right out. We're also going to take the tie rod out of our way. So you want to take the cotter pin out and the nut here and pop the tie rod free. I'm doing it from the driver's side, and we're just going to let it drop down. We're not going to take it all the way off, just get it out of our way so we can get the carrier out. All right, a little tip for popping these loose is I like to leave the castle nut on there, and then I strike the end of it right on the end, not to the boot or anything, but right on the end right here, and that'll pop it free, and then you can pull it off. So we'll try this right now. So as you can see there, it popped it loose. Just a couple taps, and now this is out of the way enough where we can get this out of the way. Now you can go ahead and remove the cover. You want to make sure you got a bucket underneath to catch the fluid, and we're going to go ahead and remove the 14mm bolt around the perimeter of the cover. Because of the spindle here, this one bolt right here, it's an Allen socket, and all the rest of them are either 14mm or 9/16. So you're going to take this one last out with an Allen bolt, and after removing the cover, we're going to move the carrier bearings. The caps here, we want to make sure that we keep them in the exact order that we took them off, from the way they fit up and down to left and right. So you want to put them in a place where you're not going to forget where they go. You can also mark the caps with paint or with a punch, and make sure you got left and right, so you keep track of these. Come on. This is the first time I've ever had this where the carrier is just so stuck in there it will not come. I got the ratcheting strap here hooked to the bumper and hooked to the carrier, and you can see it's tight. I ratcheted the heck out of it, and it's just stuck. I've tapped on it on the side, pried on it, and this is not releasing. All right, so I got some pressure on it here. Now I'm prying on the bolt here and prying here, and now it's starting to move. Now you can see it moving. It's coming out now, so we're gonna be able to get this out. So now I'm just gonna loosen this up and then pry equally on both sides, and then work the carrier out. Working it. All right, now it's coming. Woo! Now it's coming. Let's see, ratchet some more. There we go. That's nice. A little bit more prime. See if we can. Either. Probably if I spin her, she'll probably come out. All right, the bearing race went flying, but there is no shims on this hot rod, so we're just gonna go straight down to the ground. But there is no shims, which is good. That makes it nice and easy to go back together. Now the seals are here and here. We're gonna pop those out. Now that we got both axles removed, the center carrier removed, now we're gonna focus on getting the seals out from the inside here and here. Before we knock the seals out, the inner seals out, you wanna measure the depth from here to here, because we wanna knock those back in, and if we knock them in too far, they can actually fall down inside the axle tubes, and then it's a pain in the butt. Or if you don't get them centered in the exact same location, they won't ride on the same spot on the axle shaft, and it could cause leaks. So we need to make sure that we take the measurements and write this down, so when we knock these back in, we get them back into the proper depth on the both sides, left and right. So we'll make some measurements, make some notes, and then we'll knock these out. Also, when we knock these seals out, you'll see this white plastic piece in here. This is designed to guide the axle shaft in, so it goes back in and lines back up with the splines on the carrier here, so it makes everything line up. So you want to be careful not to knock that or move that in any way, because when you go back in with your axle shafts, it'll make it more difficult. So that's on both. Here's a look at it from the other side here. So that plastic sleeve, you want to make sure you don't knock that out. Pry bar with it going down, so you want to go over the white plastic piece and then down into the seal. So I'll put this over the plastic piece, and then as soon as it drops off the other side, it goes right into the seal right there. Now I'm gonna leave it upwards like this and smack the seal out. So since the axle tube is so long and a regular pry bar won't fit in there, so the solution I came up with is to use a couple of extensions here. So this one right here I use for transmissions. You can just link them all up like this. And because my car is on the left side here, the ability to get this in here. So I'm gonna slide this down there. And the same thing, I'm just gonna use the fat part to drop below that little white guide in there, and then hold it at an angle and pop the seal out. So my pry bar or extension technique wasn't working, so I went down to my shop and picked up my my seal pulling tool here. So this hooks in behind the seal like so, and then you smack it here with the hammer, driving the seal out. See if I can get this to work on camera. Let's see, so we got to get just the seal. Give it a look. It's working. All right, guys, I got the seal out, but I had to get creative with this one. Like I said, my pry bar wasn't working, so this was in here like this. And so what I ended up doing was getting the seal puller type tool here behind it here, but every time I would hit it, it would just absorb it and it would pop out. So what I ended up doing is, I'll show you. So I had it in there. This was wedged in behind the seal like this, and then what I did, a socket on the extension here, run it down on there, and then it wedged against the seal puller and kind of pinched it, and then I was able to smack it with the hammer and pop the seal out, because it kept coming off. You know, when I was hitting it with the hammer, it kept, you know, unhooking. So that worked really well. So now I'm going to take my gunk brake clean and just clean everything. So everything a good spray and wipe out and get everything nice and clean. All the spots where it leaked, the tubes, I'm going to clean out the tubes. With the tubes, I'm going to spray brake clean on a rag and then shove the rag down the tubes and clean out the tubes and get those nice and clean. So we're going to clean that, the housings, the bearing races, everything. We're going to clean it all up, the axle shafts, everything. I'm also going to clean off my mating surfaces for the gasket, scrape this old silicone off on the housing and also on the cover. So when it comes to cleaning housing, silicone off the housing cover and the housing itself, I like to use a scraper and get as much off as you can at first. Then switch over to like a roll-out disc and buff it off. Get it nice and clean. And then after you do that, then you get your brake clean and you clean everything and wipe everything out. It makes for a really good, clean mating surface. I'm going to remove all the silicone on this differential cover here and get it cleaned up. So I put my gunk brake clean to work, cleaning the covers and everything. And it made quick work of getting this mess all cleaned up. So you want to get in here and take your time and clean the tube out, the mating surface here, all the residue from the actual leak. So once you get everything nice and clean, now we can start working on going back together. So I picked up some parts at my local parts store. Part numbers may vary, but I will leave the ones that I used in my video. This is the wheel bearing here. This is the hub seal kit that I had to use. So this is the outer hub seal and axle seal. The actual inner seals are these right here. And then I had to pick up 3 liters of gear oil. You're also going to need some silicone and some good brake cleaner to clean all this mess up. Now with all of our mating surfaces cleaned up, we're going to take the seal, the inner seal, and put it in with the rubber side in. So put it in like this. So I used a bearing race tool to tap in the seal, so I just put one that fit perfectly around the seal here. Use the little hammer, and we're going to tap it in, and we're going to tap it in as far as our measurements that we took at the beginning of this process. So we're going to tap it in just a little tap at a time, and then check your measurement, make sure you're not going in too far. So you're going to walk up to this process little taps at a time, driving the seal in until it's perfectly in the exact position that we took it out in. Now we're going to do the exact same process for the opposite seal. Now we're ready to reinstall the carrier. I got the bearing races over the bearings here, and I'm just going to line up the carrier with the gear. And you just take your time centering everything up in small little increments and press and push. And if you have shims, then you're going to also line those up at the same time and slide those in. Make sure you're keeping track of the shims that were on the left and right side so everything is centered back up. We're going to put it back together exactly the way we took it apart. So as you can see here, I'm lining everything up. I'm using a little rubber mallet, and I'm tapping the bearing in on the bearing races here. Just light little taps and driving the carrier into position. It takes a little bit of finesse, but it will go in. Also, I use a pry bar to help pry in the carrier into the position. So I put the pry bar underneath right here, and you can see me rotate it up, and it worked really well for driving the bearing and everything in, as you can see right here. Another technique I used the hammer handle on the bearing races, and then I tapped the end of it, hammer, to help drive in the carrier into its final position. Now we can reinstall the bearing caps. We're going to make sure that we install them exactly the way we took them off. So the left one to the left one, the right one to the right one, and facing the right directions. Go ahead and start these bolts and fasteners, and then we're going to run them in until they're snug. I just use a little impact tool here to just lightly run them in, and I did it in a kind of a crisscross pattern. So back and forth, just drawing them in evenly. Nothing forcing, just evenly drawing them in until they're fully seated, and then we switched over to a torque wrench. My bearing cap spec was at 85 foot-pounds, so we went ahead and torqued these down in a crisscross pattern. After I torque them, I like to go around the second time and just double check that everything's torqued. Now that the carrier's in, I'm going to use my brake clean here to go over the mating surfaces one last time and wipe off any gear oil that I may have gotten on it while I was working with it, and clean up the mating surface in preparation of putting the cover back on. Alright, so now we're ready to start putting the axle shaft back in the vehicle. So we're going to change out all the seals here and the seals here. To get these off, I just put a screwdriver here and just pop it free, pop it off. This one came off when I took the axle off, but the same thing, if the seal is on here, then you just chisel it, hammer it, and pop it off. Yeah, like I said, I just put a screwdriver there and boop, popped it off right away. So now we're prepping the axle shaft here itself. So I got it mounted in a vise here. I'm gonna put the seal down like this. Now the way I would do this at the shop is I have a metal pipe and a press, and I would just press it on there. But I'm not at the shop right now and I don't have access to my press. So what I'm gonna use is a pole, a piece of pipe like this would work great. Put it over the top, and then I'm gonna use my hammer and just hammer it down on there. I did the other side already and it worked out really well. So we're gonna chalk this up to one of those scenarios is you gotta do what you gotta do to get the job done. So like I said, if I was at the shop, I would put it in a press and I would just press the, I have some different jigs I would set up and press the seal onto the actual shaft itself. But since I'm not at the shop, I gotta just do what I gotta do. So this fence post driver that I made works perfect on here. So I'm gonna just center it all up. And I'm gonna get up here and drive it down until it seats. Get a little leverage. I'm gonna climb up on top, center it up perfect, and drive the seal on. Try not to get it crooked. Now I'm just going to use a socket and kind of just work it around it and make sure it goes on nice and flat. It's a little cocked right now, so I'm going to straighten it out a little bit. It's going on nice and smooth now. Now we're going to put the other seal on and then throw it back in the truck. It goes with the groove side towards the U-joint. So just like that. This is like a dust shield, keeps the dirt and debris out of the tube. All right, so I got another piece of pipe that's gonna work just great for driving this down. Yeah, that's perfect. So you can either tap the end of it, or I'm gonna try to just drive it on just like that. Perfect. And I just drove it on till it's nice and flush. Now this is ready to go back in the vehicle. Now I'm just going to clean everything back up. Make sure it's nice and clean, and then we'll throw it back in. So I'm going to make sure the hub is cleaned up here. I'm going to center it like this, and we're going to put the axle in. It has the guide already built in the tube there to line the shaft up, so you just go in and twist. Now we're just going to line the shaft up. Slide it down the tube. We're going to center everything and twist at the same time. And there you go. It went in. And now what we're going to use is the hub. And we're going to put the hub on there and bolt it in. And that's going to suck it into place, into its final place. You notice I did not put any grease or anything on it. The reason why I don't do it is because I live in California and my hub is in like near perfect condition. If you live in somewhere like where there's rust and your hub's all rusty, you may have to add a little bit of grease on there and get it to go in there. I don't like to do it because it collects dust and dirt, so I'll leave it dry. All right, so I got my new hub here. I'm gonna install, I got the backing plate, I just took it off the old one here. And I got some red thread locker on the threads here. Now we're going to go ahead and install it. The opening portion here goes towards the knuckle. So we're going to install this just like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the shaft here to kind of center it up and just kind of wiggle it. So if you're doing this at home, you're going to want to use the hub kit here, just the O-ring here. You're going to replace the O-ring here. And then I put a little bit of the Seal Glide silicone-based grease on the seal. I put a little bit on this one already. So I put a little grease on the seal, and that'll help everything suck up in there nice and smooth. So if you're using your old one, you want to take that O-ring out of your hub kit and transfer it over. And then the other O-ring is here, and then it has a new squeeze clamp that goes in there. Everything you need to put it back together in there is sucked up in there. Now you're going to go ahead and start the nuts from the back side. And then what we're going to do is we're going to draw this in for ratchet, you know, a little bit here, a little bit there, and in a crisscross pattern, and kind of draw it up inside there until it's nice and flush. All right, once you get them all four started, now what you're going to do is just with a ratchet, tighten it up a little bit. Like I said, a little bit at a time, so it's drawing in right there. I got it till it's snug. Now I'm going to take it off, spin it, go over here, hit the corner, draw it in until it's snug, hit the top one, and then keep doing it back and forth until it draws in completely, and then we'll torque it down. All right, now we can torque these bolts down to 133 foot-pounds. All right, now I'm just going to give the axle shaft a little pry towards the hub to make sure that it's fully seated in here. And it's fully seated. Now we're going to put the hub assembly together. So now we're going to go ahead and put our washers back in. Make sure they're clean. Now we're going to put the snap ring back on. So I put the snap ring back on there, then I'm going to take a screwdriver and just tap the snap ring and make sure it's fully seated in the groove inside. So I'll give the snap ring a good tap, and make sure it's fully seated. Since our hub is new and clean and the four-wheel drive locking hub here has been wiped down, I'm going to put a little bit of grease on here. I'm just going to use some axle grease here, just a little bit, and put it on there. I'm just going to rub a little axle grease on here and change out the seal here. Put the seal from the kit, so I'm going to pop that off with a little pick. So now we can go ahead and reinstall the locking hub. Fully seats. And we can go ahead and install our retaining clip. Just squeeze it, push it in there, and that's it. Now we can clean this all up. Put our rotor on next. We're going to go ahead and put our rotor on. You want to try not to touch the mating surface with your greasy hands, so be careful with that. And now we can go ahead and clean the bolts here. Somebody put anti-seize on this bolt. I'm not a fan of the anti-seize on caliper bolts, so I'm gonna clean this off, and then I'm gonna put a little bit of thread locker on the threads, and we're gonna bolt the caliper back up. Just a little bit, not a lot. You can use blue or red, especially if you just lose a small amount. Now I'm going to put the caliper back on. You want to make sure that the brake hose is not twisted. Go ahead and slide that back on. Now we can go ahead and start our bolts. Now I'm going to run them into the snug. And then we'll switch over to a torque wrench and torque them down. Now we can torque our caliper bracket bolts to 166 foot-pounds. So I'm going to leave the tie rod off just a little bit longer until we put the differential cover back on and then fill it up with fluid, and then we'll put the tie rod on. So now we're ready to put our diff cover back on. So what we're going to do is going to put a bead of silicone around it, slap the diff cover on, tighten it down, and then we'll put the tie rod. I'm just going to use a little bit of black RTV to do this. All right, put a thin layer of silicone on it. I got a little crazy because I didn't have the little plastic tip and it got a little out of control, but so I'm going to wipe off some of this stuff here, but you just want to make a thin layer, and any excess, just wipe off. Now we're going to slap the cover back up here. Just get it on there. Start the bolts. I like to start the bottom one or the top one first, either one. Right in the center. That way you can twist it and line everything up. I like to start all the bolts first, and once they're all started, I just buzz them down. Now I like to run these down and just until they're snug, and basically a crisscross pattern, kind of like torquing the lug nuts. So top, bottom, and just keep working your way around until they're all snugged up. Now we can go ahead and take the fill plug out. I just used a 3/8 drive, pull the plug off, and now we're going to fill the differential up with gear oil. This one takes 75/90. We're going to fill it up until basically it overflows out of the hole, and then that's full. So we'll just squeeze the bottle in. So my differential took about 3 liters of gear oil. All right, now we can go ahead and install our tie rod. I got a little tip for you. Is when you tighten this up, so you're going to run this into a snug. So you're going to run it into a snug, and then we're going to torque it down to 57 foot-pounds. So now we're going to torque it to 57 foot-pounds. But my tip for you guys is if the cotter pin hole doesn't line up, always tighten it a little more until the hole lines up, and then put a new cotter pin in. Don't back it off, loosen it. So tighten it more. So that's the tip for you. Now we're ready to throw the tire on and torque the wheels down. All right, now that we got the vehicle off the jack stands and back down on the ground, we're going to torque the lug nuts to 165. We're going to do that in a star pattern, and then after that we're going to go test out our locking hubs, go for our test drive, make sure all that works. All right guys, so there you have it. That's how you replace the axle seals on your Ford F250 and save yourself upwards of $1,200. I'd like to thank our sponsor Gunk for helping us out with this project. Without the Gunk, we would not be able to clean all these parts up. So if you're doing this job and you need some Gunk products, the links will be down in the description. I'm Brian Esser from How to Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching and encourage you to subscribe.